This is about the most nerve-wracking moment of the entire course for me. What I'm holding is an extraordinarily rare object from the collections here at the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in Stratford-upon-Avon. It looks rather simple, and it is. It's a money pot. So what's it for, and why is it rare? Well, once you've got a professional theatre and a theatre building, you can start charging for entrance. In the older days, actors would just perform in the yards of taverns and would pass the hat round afterwards. But once theatre buildings were erected in the 1570s and 80s in Elizabethan London, then you could have a regular repertoire, put the play on the same time each afternoon, charge a fixed amount, and people would have to pay to come in. You would have a box office, as we now call it. Why was it called a box office? Well, because people would put money in the box. And this is the box. This is a money pot. It's of the kind that would have been held by what we would now call the box office staff, but what in Shakespeare's time were called the gatherers, the people who would stand by the doors of the theatre and ask the groundlings to put in a penny in order to enter the theatre, another penny if they wanted to go in the seated galleries, and maybe another one for a cushion. In order to expedite the process of counting up the proceeds, the takings of the box office, once everybody was in and the play was underway, the gatherers would go round backstage and they would just smash the money pots. They were cheap pottery objects, they could easily get some more, and out would come all the pennies, a lot quicker than what your child does when they open up a little hole at the bottom and get the pennies out one by one from a modern money pot. And because they were smashed when they were full, very, very few of them survive in complete form. And that's why this rather beautiful example is such a rare object. Theatre is a communal art. It's companies who put on plays. And companies need a lot of people backstage as well as in front. There's a bit of a myth about the Shakespearean theatre, which is that everything was done by men, that women were not allowed on stage. Well, actually, it's a more complicated story than that. It is true that the actors were all male, but the reason for that was not that women were banned from being on stage, but rather that the acting companies were constructed like the trade guilds of the time, using an apprenticeship system, which meant young actors were taken on as apprentices. They were teenage boys, they had high voices, they were the obvious people to fill the female parts. But women were closely involved with the acting companies, typically, though, in backstage roles, making the costumes, dealing with the wigs, the makeup, those sorts of activity that are still in the theatre today, predominantly done by women. And we also know that women were among the gatherers. Now, it is just possible that once the pots had been broken, the money counted and safely put away, that the gatherers would then have been available to play the part of on-stage extras. It's certainly striking that in a lot of Shakespeare's plays you get crowd scenes later in the play. Where do the crowds come from? It could well be that this was an additional role for the women who gathered the money pots. And if that is the case, then it may well be that women would have been among the extras on stage. So one way the acting companies made money was through the box office, through the public performances in the London theatres. But they also made money through command performances at court. And the scenes in Midsummer Night's Dream in which Theseus and Hippolyta ask for entertainment to be put on to celebrate their wedding gives us a lovely insight into something of the mechanics of court performance. "Come now," says Theseus at the beginning of the final scene of the play, "what masks, what dances shall we have to wear away this long age of 3 hours between our after supper and bedtime?" So there would be a royal feast, and then there would be 3 hours till bedtime, and you would have dances or masks, which were a form of theatrical performance, or a play. "Where is our usual manager of mirth?" asks Theseus, calling for the master of revels, the court official in charge of the practicalities of stagings at court? What revels are in hand? Is there no play to ease the anguish of a torturing hour? And then Theseus says to Aegeus, say, what abridgment have you for this evening? What mask? What music? How shall we beguile the lazy time, if not with some delight? It's quite interesting, that word abridgment. It suggests that plays were flexible in length. If the court wanted a shorter play, maybe the full stage version would have to be abridged. And we do have evidence that Shakespeare's plays were indeed sometimes abridged, performed in cut versions. And then Aegeus offers a whole choice of entertainments. There is a brief, he says, how many sports are ripe, make choice of which your highness will see first. And then a variety of possible entertainments are proposed. And of course what is chosen is the comical tragedy of Pyramus and Thisbe, put on by Peter Quince, Nick Bottom, and the troupe of rude mechanicals. This is Shakespeare's acting company having a joke at their own expense.